for true.
Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted frontiers of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together, we'll unravel the tapestry of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into the dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
And I'm Dean, and both of us got rough voices this week. So
right off the top, we're going to say, I'm sure you can see it or hear it already, but yeah, we're both kind of under the weather. We pushed the recording of this off a couple days, hoping something would change, but
I think it's better than it would have been 2 days ago, sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was like in and out of words, like dropping,
Yeah,
losing my voice.
Man, because my voice was already rough on the last episode, and I went through all that, and I was just starting to get better, and then all of a sudden I got hit again.
I know, it's just a season.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're recording this a couple days before Christmas.
Yeah. So Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas to everybody if you're watching this.
Or Happy Holidays if you're not a Christmas person.
Yep. Happy Holidays. Enjoy your family and friends around this time, and
Totally.
So episode 53.
Episode 53. We've got kind of a handful, grab bag of different things. The main thing I brought this week is this Jesse Michaels episode with Carl Nell and Diana Pasulka.
Are they in front of a live audience?
Yeah, this is at an event called Hereticon, which
cool.
is such a cool name for an event.
Yeah. Cool, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, and then the second half of the video, he's just like interviewing Diana backstage, and they're just chilling, talking. Nice. Diana's one of my favorite people in this space.
Me too. She's so level-headed and
she's open-minded while also being very highly academic. So she can talk detail
on
while
sides.
also like being willing to talk about possibilities and trends and ideas without like necessarily like nailing,
but uses the scientific method in a lot of her research and like the way that she goes
through
her investigations and stuff.
Yeah.
So she's fascinating. And then obviously this is that what was that guy's name?
Carl Nell.
Carl Nell, yeah.
Yeah. He's one of the UFO whistleblowers.
We listened to a lot of his stuff earlier.
Yeah.
A couple videos ago.
He was the one that had the 6 reasons why UFOs are probably kept secret.
Right. Why they would be. Yeah.
Right. And he also gave a number of reasons for why he thought disclosure was a better course of action, and we covered that in one episode.
And he also had the view of like slow progressive disclosure, right?
He thinks we need to start moving because if the government doesn't start on the disclosure process, he's the one that's saying it's going to be a catastrophic disclosure if
it'll be more chaotic,
right? And that has like potential.
Are we seeing the beginnings of that now in New Jersey?
That's interesting. I've got some stuff on that too to give a bit of an update.
Just real quick, I don't know, maybe this is part of your update.
Go ahead.
But I just want to make sure. We'll wait. We
can just go into that part now.
Yeah, let's start that.
What are you thinking?
I was just thinking like my or what I saw recently is about how the water supply in New Jersey is now being reported to be affected by like their water supply that's like smelling like alcohol or acetane, like
interesting
nail polish remover, people are saying, and that it was like yellowish for a while. This is like within the last few weeks.
No, I haven't seen that.
And then like it's starting to clear up like the coloration, but it still smells really crazy. And like this is similar to what happened in like Flint, Michigan.
I haven't checked in the last couple of days either. Are these things still there every night right now?
I don't know if they're as prevalent. I'm seeing a lot of old videos, but I have seen a few new, more supposed high resolution videos of these things. And one of them actually did look exactly like that.
Here's the mystery drone Facebook group. Let's see what they got.
Some of them did look like that experimental one that we showed at the end of our last episode, with the one with the propellers that move from side to side and like propel it forward, vertical takeoff.
Yeah, people are still seeing them. Here's one posted from a couple hours ago.
Yeah.
First videos and
so what if it is, dude? What if it is some sort of like response to something that's happening? It's like it's government drones looking for or.
So I've got this article here from dailymail.com. It's called Uncovered Files Reveal Secret Operation at Center of Drone Invasion and Why White House Can Deny It. Official records show the Army has been developing and testing counterterrorism drones in New Jersey for years amid claims of government cover-up. A 2018 defense contract awarded $50 million to a private robotics company to develop craft capable of creating 3D maps of urban areas for counter weapons of mass destruction program. The contract was given out by Army's Armament Research Development and Engineering Center, ARDEC, which is located at the Picatinny Arsenal in Rockaway, New Jersey, where mystery drones were first reported last month. Meanwhile, documents show the Federal Aviation Administration issued an air restriction alert on November 21, prohibiting flights over the Picatinny base for special security reasons through December 26th. The White House has claimed drone sightings, which coincidentally began November 18th, are not a foreign adversary, pose no threat, and are not part of a U.S. military operation. Retired CIA intelligence officer Rudy Rodolfi told DailyMail.com this FAA notice shows U.S. drone testing is happening in the area. It's a warning for others to stay out of the area during those dates. While the nature of the testing isn't specified, it's most likely the testing of payloads related to reconnaissance. But Matt Sloan, founder of drone consulting firm AI Skyfire, told DailyMail.com that the sightings could be a contractor developing these drones for the DoD. The DoD can deny claims of third-party technologies if the drones were placed on a secure tech list for contract disclosures, which means the government is applying special restrictions to the information. The restrictions are added when technologies protect national security or keep advanced systems hidden from hostile nations, and the developer holds primary liability if the government is not operating the drones, Rodolfi explained. So in a way, they're not lying, saying they're not theirs, because if it's like the contractor that's flying them, then they can say truthfully that they're not government drones.
And they can say it's not a foreign adversary, and they can say it poses no threat. Pose no threat.
And all of those things can be true statements at the same time.
While they're denying any, but they know exactly what's going on. They don't have to say that they know exactly what's going on. They just have to say it's not government.
Right. And so I actually heard this on the Tim Pool podcast. This is where I saw the first, he linked this article. So I'll link it to you guys if you want to read the whole thing. There's more, but
I mean, that's a legitimate reason, to be honest. And it's obviously going to worry people, but if it's being tested in an area and they know it poses no threat and they're just testing their capability of mapping urban areas without, and maybe it still is having some sort of effect, right? Because now we got the water incident in New Jersey. So maybe whatever it is they're testing is actually doing something in some way.
I don't know if I'm ready to go there yet, but I would need a little more than some social media hearsay to see that stuff is happening.
That's true.
But for real, that the drones are real. That's actually happening. And this seems like a pretty sensible explanation. The other explanation I've been seeing is that essentially that they're scanning for some sort of nuclear material. I forget what this guy's take is, and I'm not super interested in playing it anymore, but
it's long because he doesn't really get to the point till the end.
Right. Yeah. But I'll link this. There's another guy who has an idea of what's going on.
Yeah. I've seen it. I watched that one too. I mean, it seems legit, but
yeah,
at least part of it. Yeah, I mean, it's just what they're responding to, too, right? Is it that they're responding to them, or is it that they're testing?
Yeah.
Are they responding to something that people are talking about? And some of those images we saw of those orbs don't look like military drones.
Right. Right.
Those do not look like what we can describe as something that and obviously we don't know that that's not something that that's what they're testing, and what they're doing all the other actual drones are just to mislead.
Yeah,
it could be both, right?
And that sort of goes back to Lou Elizondo's theory, is that there's some sort of maybe there was like a UAP thing that the drones are responding to.
Exactly.
And so people are sort of seeing a mixture of both. But that really cool like Star Wars looking one that we showed last time, that's come out as just CGI. So
it looked too much like Star Wars.
Yeah. But that was cool looking.
It was. Well, and even the orb at Manchester, that orb was...
They're saying that was some sort of like Chinese balloon.
Yeah.
Or like a Chinese lantern, they said.
That's what it was, yeah. Which could have, I don't know. There was a lot of analysis of it, and there's people like doing like infrared.
Yeah,
like
but
stuff.
even Lou Elizondo was bringing that one up. So it's like it's interesting that Lou Elizondo is like hopping on the hype train on these UFO stuff and giving like
Well, and we know that there is still the possibility that he's disinformation, and at least we don't know. We don't know that. We can't say that all the information he's said is 100% factual, or it is factual. Because
even if he is different disinformation, he's disinformation in a way that's at least closer to the truth, because he is claiming that UFOs are real.
Sure,
they're absolutely a real phenomenon according to him. So, but
he could be part of the controlled disclosure
disinformation. Right? He's more like trying to portray it in a way that we need to be very concerned from a national security standpoint.
Yeah.
Versus,
which makes me worried.
Versus the attitude that these craft so clearly exhibit way beyond our level of technology, and if they had any intent to threaten us or do us harm, like they could have done it so long ago.
Right, and there's no reason to believe that they have that intent, right?
Yeah. Anyway, so that's a little update on the drone. Tell us if you guys have some more stuff on it. I would like to know more.
I haven't been keeping super close tabs on it, but I saw the water one. It was some news articles on it, and then a video of people talking about it. But
yeah.
Who knows? Who knows if that's even real?
Yeah, well, the hysteria seems to have died down a little bit, at least. But
at least the saturation of it on the internet.
But the Facebook group's still going strong.
Yeah. So do you want to go back and do our weekly Bashar?
Yeah, let's start off here though. We got a couple comments on YouTube to an old episode of ours. This was episode 5. We got 2 comments on episode 5
from the same person.
Guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is part 1 of our Secret History of the World kind of series on that book.
Yeah.
And this is 6 days ago. So it's just after a day or so after we recorded our last episode.
Yeah. Did you go back and listen to the part of the show he's talking about here?
No. Did he reference?
No, I actually went and did like a little AI search of our script and
you
found the timestamp and then went and looked at it. So he's actually quoting you here saying you can't prove them wrong. And he's like, no need to. The burden of proof is on the claimer to prove their claim. You can't disprove there's not a planet of just giraffes and koala bears, or a planet where carrots and celery talk. Of the options for consciousness, the option that consciousness is an emergent property of matter seems to be most reasonable to me anyway. And so I would say in response to that, making the claim that you can't prove it wrong, he does have a point there, that saying that you can't prove something wrong isn't proof that the alternate theory that you're proposing is true necessarily. You're just saying, here's one that you can't prove wrong, but there's a lot of things you can't necessarily prove wrong right away. And so that is a sort of fair argument. However, there is actually a lot of evidence, a lot of lines of evidence for consciousness being possibly underlying physics rather than the other way around, rather than physics and matter building up and somehow consciousness emerging from it, there is starting to become more lines of evidence and more lines of research and reason to support the idea that it may be the other way around, where consciousness is at least underlying or primary or on the same level with material.
Yeah, especially if you start to take into account some of the more spiritual aspects of like consciousness and
yeah. And we actually have some stuff on that today with I've got a video on Dean Radin that we're gonna check out. So he also asked, I think, about Secret History of the World. How similar is it to Manly Hall's Secret Teachings book? Yeah, Manly P. Hall has a book called Secret Teachings of All Ages, and it's this giant, thick book. I have it, but I actually haven't read it. I've always been intimidated to crack that book.
Is it pretty big?
Yeah, it's a big, thick book, and it's essentially, my understanding, because I haven't read it, is that it's essentially like a history of the occult. A history. Whereas the Secret History of the World is meant to kind of take all of these secret societies and occult groups,
put it into a story,
and like assemble a story of what they're all kind of telling us is the history of the world according to them.
Without
this is more a history of the occult itself,
like the actual practice things and like what they specific beliefs about things.
Yeah, so this one, mainly P. Hall's, will be more like going over what groups came up when, what they contributed here and there,
how things change over time based on the different things. Yeah.
It's less a focus on like the narrative story.
Yeah.
Right.
I would love to have enough time to read that.
It's a cool book. I've like flipped through it and stuff. There's so much like cool imagery.
Oh, is there? I am sure I dig it.
Yeah, I want to dig into it. Cool. So we got our weekly Bashar. Let's check this one out.
And that there is something very large going on. It involves humanity, and it involves humanity from a parallel reality. The beings that you refer to in general, that are most often associated with the so-called detainment or abduction or contact phenomena, this idea is that they are mutated humans from a parallel version of Earth. They destroyed their version of Earth. They needed to mutate themselves in order to thrive to a certain point, but use their advanced technology to shift into parallel realities such as yours, where they would find viable human DNA that would allow them to perpetuate their civilization, because the destruction of their world had caused them to have the inability to reproduce, and they were dying out. Because of the mutation, they appear to you to be extraterrestrial. They are not. They are simply humans from another parallel version of Earth that have come to your version of Earth and other versions of Earth to gather human DNA to create hybrid species, such as my own civilization, in order to perpetuate their culture and survive. In return, as a gift, for the gift you have given them and us for our existence, we assist you by giving you information that ideally would prevent your culture from going down the same destructive path that their culture went down, so that you don't have to experience the same thing that they did.
Interesting. Okay. You know, it's funny. I was just watching the one that this is from.
Oh, really?
Yeah, our sister has.
Are you using
Gaia
yours?
Subscription?
I think she sent it to me. I haven't. I don't think I've logged in on it.
Yeah, I signed in, and being sick, I was like, perfect time to watch some documentaries on Bashar. And yeah, I know that's from the same one because it's the same girl interviewing him. But I never got to the point. I think I fell asleep.
Oh, yeah.
I never got to the point where he was channeling. She was still talking to Daryl Anka at the part I was at.
Oh, okay.
That's an interesting idea. So instead of future humans, so now we're talking like a parallel dimension. We're talking like
parallel timeline.
like a multiversal type thing.
It would be a different branch of a similar, like, I mean, I guess it depends on how you see it, right? How it actually functions. But a parallel reality suggests that if it changes our timeline, it won't affect our future. It won't affect them in such a way that it would create a paradox,
right?
Because they're on a completely different timeline. So that would make sense, right? Like time travel being the whole paradox thing. So if something was to, come back and affect something so that it never was there to like come back and do the thing, to help. So this would kind of solve that at least.
So
that idea.
Is he making it sounded for a second anyway that he was making a distinction between them and his culture.
Mm-hmm. It seemed like
that essentially the Greys are these aliens from a different timeline, or these humans from a different timeline.
Yep.
And that his is something different.
It sounds like
they're also doing a hybrid program, but theirs is for a different reason.
It sounds like maybe this is what creates new timelines and new dimensions, right? Is if one figures out how to shift realities, and then they create another life form to try to save themselves. That like almost the creation of the life form is the switch that like creates a new reality. So they are also, because they were created by the people who had the technology to be advanced enough to shift realities to get the human DNA, created a new timeline in which they saved themselves from the ultimate, their original timeline. So in so creating a new life form, it created a new timeline so that...
I don't know that he was implying all that. I think he was just implying that
I'm just saying how
there are different
would it work?
timelines, and in one there is this group who is us, but screwed themselves up.
Right, but it would have to be on a whole different timeline. I'm just trying to...
Right. Yeah, but as far as I don't think anything he said in there was saying like what creates that timeline necessarily.
Oh no, I'm just speculating that part of it specifically. But I would say that they're on a timeline that's different from the timeline of the people who created them.
Yeah, I mean, there's no implication for who created them or anything necessarily.
Or I guess it would just have to be in their past. Like it could just be an ancient form of them that created them, and I don't know.
No, just like imagine there's multiple timelines, whether it's like the multiverse, like the Everett's many worlds interpretation, where like every time a atom could collapse here, collapse there, it actually collapses both, and so like there's constant branching worlds. That could be the case, or it could be the case that there's like,
every choice makes a new timeline,
or. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever the case is for why there's different timelines, that there's some version of humans like us, but for them in their history, they screwed themselves up, and so they're coming here. They have the technology to come here, and they're coming here.
But what he was suggesting is that race is different. It's separate from them, but it is their creator. That's what I was getting hung up on. Because he didn't seem to suggest that it was their ancestors were the ones who went back or shifted parallel timelines. Even though that is the case, I don't know. Maybe I just misheard it.
I think, I don't know. I think he's implying that his species is different. Because he has talked in multiple like interviews and stuff about him like essentially being like a first contact specialist
within the society. Yeah.
Like that's his job.
Yeah.
And that seems it seems different than the mission of coming here. Because when you hear him talking all of his different stuff, it seems like he's coming here to like help us and enlighten us versus the other ones, they seem to be here to help themselves and like give us something in return, maybe. But it seems like different programs.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
Because I've also heard him talk about hybridized children as like the reason that that his people are doing it is so that when they do come here to make first contact, they will do it with the hybrids that they've made so that they're easier in between their species and ours.
So what if all the different aliens are actually all different branches of the timeline, right? So like, what if like each decade where there's like an onslaught of UFO sightings, it's like another offshoot or another timeline screwing up and coming back to get human DNA of the one timeline that doesn't fuck it up? Or
why is our DNA so good, man?
Well, it's because we haven't fucked it up yet, right? So maybe some sort of...
It seems like we're in the process.
Oh, I know. But we'll be one of those societies that are going to go back in 1,000 years or whatever, shift into a new parallel timeline and do the same thing to that other timeline. Be their UFOs, be their abductors, right? That's an interesting way to think about it.
All right, so what's this one? Dinosaur cells disprove original extinction date.
So yeah, they just... I'll let it speak for itself, but...
All right, let's check this out.
We're actually seeing is those cells still in this, let me repeat, unknown specimen, but dinosaur bone from the Hell Creek Formation in Glendive, Montana.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct.
Look at, that's literally the cell.
Yeah. That's what they look
Cell. Fibers not deteriorated, not turned to dust yet. Cell.
Philopodia. Correct.
Sliced last week, 7 days old.
Correct. So this is 400. Let's go up to 600.
Look at that.
Yeah, right in there. If you like, we can look for some collagen. There's collagen in the specimen.
Okay. Here's what I learned from Dr. T last week.
Yep.
And I do remember this part. So collagen is the longest lasting, I'll call it biomaterial protein in bone. Mm-hmm. And so if there's collagen that lasts the longest, and that would be shelf life of somewhere around 1 million years under decent preservation conditions.
Best.
And we're still finding that in here. We got a major problem for the evolutionary worldview of dinosaurs died 65 million years ago. Collagen in here shuts that. It's like game over. End. Nuclear bomb.
I mean, okay. I didn't see the scientific argument for how long it takes collagen to break down, though.
Well, I said the longest lasting at the maximum it would last is like just over 1 million years.
Yeah, but I heard him saying that. I didn't hear like a scientific explanation for that, or I'm hearing him like establish that, like claim that. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, I would have to find a follow-up paper.
Yeah,
on it. So it says dinosaur soft tissue found in lab. Eric Hoven, Jim Hoff, and Clay Turner. Creation Today show. Yeah, I don't know if this is just like a YouTuber who goes and like gets scientists. Like he seemed super excited about it, and the scientists were kind of nodding along. At least people in lab coats.
I don't need the timeline to be exactly as modern science.
The thing is,
out,
it makes sense to me that dinosaurs may have lived a lot longer. I always imagined, like, I understand that the asteroid was massive and it probably killed the majority of things.
Yeah, but
life survived. Like, there's got to be. We know that there are certain species that are descendant of dinosaurs.
Like
so we know
birds.
Yeah, so we know that like the DNA survived.
Alligators and crocodiles are dinosaurs.
So why is it that some of the other bigger dinosaurs maybe didn't survive? Maybe survived a little longer too.
Well, higher body weight.
I mean,
flora is more sensitive to environmental change because they have to
require
eat
so much
more in order to stay alive. And so when the environment goes through a drastic change, it all of a sudden becomes very hard to put that many calories in their body to keep them alive.
But that doesn't, like, what about, over time there being mutations enough to like shrink and like survive and just be smaller and smaller until.
Well, my understanding is that essentially what we call dinosaurs is becoming more and more indistinguishable from birds, from avian species. They're
they're becoming, all of them are starting to look more and more like them as they learn more about them.
Yeah, and so it makes sense that like the small ones would survive, but like the giant massive ones that existed back then, yeah, what giant asteroid hitting is gonna kill just about everything. But I mean, I'm also saying like I don't need that 65 million year timeline to be totally accurate, precise. Like there could be pockets.
It's long enough in the past.
And in fact, there probably were pockets that did survive for certain amounts of time. It's just they couldn't. Their longevity wasn't
unless there was a pocket
much longer.
Yeah, unless there was more to like the way the Earth recovered or was affected during that time. But
yeah, I mean, this is all like
theoretical.
I don't see any reason.
It's all just
I don't see enough reason to question it. And saying that there's collagen. Well, I just don't know enough about the different ways of fossilization and the different ways of that we can find bones.
Well, the only reason I would say that there is an interest for me is like a lot of these old stories, like a lot of these old myths where they talk about dragons and a lot of these like maybe because those were avian and they flew and they weren't like these ground walking birds from the past. Maybe they were able to migrate quicker and move to places that are safe, live in caves, live in mountainsides, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Those might have been actually stuff that survived. And even some of the smaller ones, we know the small ones from back in the actual Jurassic period were actually quite massive, even though they were small in comparison to a lot of the other giant dinosaurs. So maybe some of those survive for a lot longer, and those maybe some of these like really old myths and some of the like we know the story is being pushed back as long as how far humans have been around. So maybe there is some overlap at some distant time,
Yeah, but even pushing humans back, I mean, we're
hundreds of thousands, maybe 500.
It depends on who you talk to. Like if you talk to like the Randall Carlsons, Graham Hancocks, and like this sort of alternate history community, they push it back. They aren't even necessarily challenging science, so they're pushing it back 300, 400,000 years for modern humans, but hominids, like our direct ancestors, we already know go back millions of years. The question is, like, if you talk to someone like Michael Cremo, I don't know if you've ever seen his work, but he's like a Buddhist, I believe, and whatever like school of Buddhism he's associated with, they have like creation myth that puts humans back like tens of millions of years. And so he's got a whole presentation on humans being a lot older, and he pushes it back in the tens of millions. He actually does argue that we coexisted with dinosaurs. And he's got his own line of evidence for that. I've checked out some of his stuff, and sometimes I find it more convincing than other times. Like that is a very big claim, and I need more than one guy.
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
Claiming it to believe it, or I need some like really rock solid proof. Anyway, if you're interested in like checking out humans overlapping with dinosaurs, check out his stuff.
Okay.
But
it would be a very fascinating, especially if like if modern humans go back as far as we know they did, and even maybe a little bit farther, like some percentage.
We're talking
farther.
about Homo sapiens.
Homo sapiens. Yeah, no, I'm talking about. We know how far they go back, and we know that they had our modern physiology and modern
estimates. Yeah.
I'm just saying we know they go back really far. We have estimates that they go back really far, however far that is. But I just think it's possible that it's possible that there was some sort of cycle, right? Where some hominid did have the traits of humans at some point. So whether it was Homo sapien or not,
right,
and whether they were as technologically capable, or if maybe they were more primitive, at least in some of their technologies, but they had some understanding of what the place they were living. They had community. They had some sort of language. They were able to communicate and build some sort of.
It's just such a big time gap, like 2 to 4 million years for hominids, and like 65 million for dinosaurs. That is a gigantic gap. That is huge.
But there's still technically those ancestors on Earth. So we're not talking about like so far that the entire proof that there was ever something called or had that DNA, right?
Yeah.
It's still around. So I'm not saying that it's
and we have to remember that the way like science works is they go out and they dig and they find stuff. But just because you found stuff and you've sampled a bunch of places doesn't mean you found everything. In fact, we know we've, barely scratched the surface as far as covering the surface of the globe for finding species. And in fact, there's some species you'll never find because they're all made out of soft tissue that will fully degrade. There's some species that you only find because of the most absolute lucky circumstances that happen to preserve one specimen. It's very, very hard. Like it takes perfect circumstances to create these fossils. It's not like the Earth is just this fossil machine. Like, and if I just like walk down the street and like die on a field, like in a million years, you're not going to necessarily have a Dean fossil there.
Right.
If I if I die in like a bog.
Yeah. So what's the percentage
underwater or in like certain scenarios with like low oxygen environments, like there's certain ways, or like a meteor hits the northern ice cap and I get buried under 2 miles of ice.
Yeah.
Like the mastodons that you know, some of the mammoth that
a lot of those are just
people
getting vaporized.
can still eat like mammoth steaks because they've been preserved on ice this whole time.
That's right. Oh man, imagine doing that.
Yeah. But it takes particular circumstances in order to preserve things. So the fact that we are finding certain things.
Yeah. What's the percentage of what we're like? How could they calculate the percentage of how many species and how much? How do they? They calculate what they do see based on like the area and how much you
can do statistical tricks and you can use estimations for like fossilization rates and like based on certain
geological
climactic areas and and you can kind of like try and work out the math for like maybe what percentage of stuff you've actually found, but it's all estimates. And there's probably we know for sure that we've barely tiny nicked the surface of all the species that existed in the past that we actually have any direct evidence for today.
Well, and based on Bashar, we can't rule out that somebody just slipped into a different parallel around the times when there was dinosaurs and just lived with them for a while.
Yeah, there's that too.
Let's take a break.
All right.
We'll come back and we'll hit you with some more.
This is Stevie Nader, Virtuous.
Take my hand, we'll take this world Till the darkness wins. But I came for you. I'm not living without you. I came for you. I'm not living without you. I came for you. I'm not living without you. I came for you. I'm not living without you. I came for you. I'm not living without you. I came for you. I'm not living without you.
Welcome back.
Living without you.
So we haven't done it in a few weeks anyways, but we're not doing a beer review this week. We are doing a tea review because we're both sick.
This tea's nice.
We're drinking English Tea Shop's organic white citrus tea.
Yeah, I like it. I've had a lot of tea today. It really seems to help with the throat.
So yeah, there's your tea review for the week.
It's good. All right, so Drew saved this. I listened to this podcast as well this week.
This is on Danny Jones' podcast. This is Gregg Braden. He's a biblical geologist. And the episode that this is technology, aliens, and human origins.
Yeah, Gregg Braden's interesting to me. I like him because he has been into this whole, he has, training as a geologist. So he has like scientific background and he understands how to like look at things that way. But at some point in his life, he got into this whole, alternative history and like, for lack of a better term, I hate this term, but like new age way of looking at things. And he's become sort of a thinker and a speaker in this space. Mm-hmm. He's interesting because I like him because he doesn't like try and he's not too crazy with his claims. Like right. He's pretty conservative with the types of things he claims, or at least in my opinion, compared to some of the people who are out there.
But yeah, so this portion that I wanted to clip out reminded me a lot of our conversation last week when we had talked about, I don't know if we talked about it on podcast, but we talked about it outside, about the idea of whether AI, the idea that we create the AI and maybe the AI at some point is able to have and incarnate in souls, and it is what's known as the higher power or whatever. When it becomes the soul, and it then is incarnating into humans, which is what's creating it. It's like
interesting, like the never-ending.
The idea of
Ouroboros.
We were kind of spitballing that idea, like what is the beginning,
Yeah.
Anyway, this reminded me a lot of that, so yeah, that's why I clipped it. But it's also very fascinating on its own if you don't put it with that context.
So let's check it out.
Article right here, published 2022.
I don't know if that's the article. That may be an article.
Brain cells in a lab dish learn to play Pong and offer a window onto intelligence. A dish of living brain cells has learned to play the 1970s arcade game Pong. About 800,000 cells linked to a computer gradually learn to sense the position of the game's electronic ball and control the virtual paddle, a team reports in the journal Neuron. Whoa.
All right, see, even they're missing the point. Because the question is, how does a cell even know to begin to respond, to play this game?
Right.
Okay, so here's the point. Here's the point they're missing. Where science has taken a big turn is we've always thought of our bodies as soft, sticky, gooey, wet, mushy cells and biological stuff. In recent years now, scientists are beginning to look at the human body from an IT perspective, information technology. And the discoveries are not being published in the biology text. They're coming out in IEEE and these obscure engineering journals, the Journal of Advanced Computing Technology. That's where they're showing the study. And nobody, I mean, my genre, people aren't reading them, and I don't know about our viewers. So you're not seeing a lot of this stuff. Here is what they found. They literally are saying now that human DNA is a fractal antenna. What that means, fractal antenna, it's not just tuned to one thing, it is tuned to broad spectrum information across a vast array of bandwidths, okay? It's not just tuned to one. Human cells are also antenna. Human neurons are also antenna, all right? The antenna in that Petri dish, the instructions for the Pong are not in the neurons. The neurons are the antenna, the biological antenna that tune to the place, the information in the field that underlies all existence. The field that was revealed, CERN Superconducting Supercollider, 2012, announced that there is a field underlying all existence. They now acknowledge that.
Like a field of consciousness?
Well, some people call it consciousness. It's information. It's a field of information. And now it's a very different way of thinking. And I got to tell you, this is not my training. I was not trained to think this way. I had to cross traditional boundaries and open my mind to follow the data to where it's leading rather than trying to force the data into a pre-existing story.
Right.
All right. And that's important for all of us. So the neurons in the Petri dish are in communication with a field. Pong was played by millions of people for so long. There is a vibratory essence held in that field. Some spiritual traditions call it the Akashic Records, or you call it the Matrix or the Divine Matrix or the Planck vibratory field or the 0 point field or whatever you want to call it. There's all, depending on the application, people give it different names. The bottom line is that we are a field of, it's not out there. We are part of that field. And the neurons in that Petri dish are tuned to the place in the field where Pong lives. And the longer they play, that's how they are able to get better and better. The neurons in the Petri dish are tuned to Pong in the field. The neurons in our brain and in our heart and the cells of our body are tuned to the field that holds our divinity. When our biology is replaced, we no longer have those antennae communicating with that part of the field, and we become lost, we become frightened, we become fearful, and we become vulnerable to the control and the agendas of others.
You can stop it right there. I think that would be fascinating to prove that neurons are the antenna, because we speculated on that idea before, like the idea that our brains or our consciousness is an antenna of some sort of higher self or whatever.
My issue with his theory is he seems to. So in some circles, or at least a while ago, when you tried to explain like sort of psychic style events, they would try and explain it as like your brain gives off electromagnetic waves. And so those waves go out into the world and other people's brains pick up those waves. And that's how psychic phenomena work. He seems to be sort of in that vein. My problem with that is when you follow the like more modern cutting edge researchers in these fields like Dean Radin, they've actually controlled for that, and they can do all of these tests from within Faraday cages where there is no electromagnetic radiation that can get into the person who's being tested, and they still exhibit those abilities.
But he didn't seem to suggest that it was electromagnetic fields. He seemed to suggest that it was this information stream.
Well,
that's underlying reality is like the idea of these the Akashic records, or like
by calling it an antenna, by calling DNA an antenna, you're sort of implying that there are waves that antenna is tuning to.
Well, sure. I mean, that's a good way to like basically make it easy to understand. Obviously, I don't think that it didn't sound like he was suggesting that it was mechanical, because he's also suggesting like that it's some sort of like he's also suggesting that the technology is,
that it's not necessarily electromagnetic waves, but that it's
maybe
waves
it's like some sort of like
of
chemical,
this like Higgs boson field that like
that's
quantum
what
physics
it seems
is.
like.
But I don't think anyone has enough information about the Higgs field, and there's a.
And he said 0 point.
Like the more you like look into quantum mechanics and stuff, like it seems like there's just the way they explain stuff is that there's fields for all these different, like a bunch of different particles have their own sort of unique fields that don't necessarily interfere with each other. And so the Higgs is just one of them. So he's pointing it out because he's right that they did, prove the Higgs boson and talked about the Higgs field, but it's not that's the only field they've discovered. There's a bunch of fields that they talk about in quantum mechanics.
Well, and what if that has to do with? I mean, I don't know. He didn't specifically say that it was only one field either. He was more just like making the idea known that it could be like certain genes or certain types of particles within your body are tuned to different things, and maybe your neurons are tuned to a specific information like bandwidth or whatever, and that there's other bandwidths or other types of information that other parts of your body are tuned to as well.
It just seems like he's not necessarily up on his research is all I'm saying.
He was also, I mean, he said it was from some like obscure magazine but that he had read about.
The general all right, so let's examine the general, the idea he's making here is that the neurons attached to a computer chip that are taught to play the game Pong. I don't see a reason to need to go to the explanation that the neurons are tapping into some energy field in order to learn to play Pong. I don't see why that needs to happen.
Well, he's not saying that they're he said specific. I don't know what the paper he's referring to said, but he's saying that the neurons they're not like electronically stimulated to play the game of Pong. They're just learning, like they're hooked up to Pong, and that the neurons are controlling it, are able to somehow electrically tell the game to move.
Yeah, but I think if you dig into the actual neuroscience paper,
that's what I'm wondering. That might be true.
They will probably talk about the actual mechanism of how they connect these neurons to the computer chip, and then how they communicate electronically between the chip and the neuron, and what type of feedback loops they set up so that they can set up, reward and, carrot and stick mechanisms for the neurons that
would be good to know, because
to let them know when they're succeeding and not. And I just feel like there's a lot more depth to it.
There most likely is, He definitely brushes over this, but it's one of his evidences to talk about his idea that changing our human biology is interfering with whatever that connection is.
Yeah.
That's his
overarching
point. Right. With his book and with these podcasts that he's on.
Yeah.
But
I tend to sort of agree with his overarching points without necessarily agreeing with his specifics.
Oh yeah, his citations.
Yeah.
But I do think they raise interesting questions, and I think they raise interesting conversation as to
totally,
because science is unwilling to explore some of these topics that, like telepathy and reincarnation, and whether at
certain
least
institutions don't want those things looked at. But there are obviously a ton of open-minded scientists out there who are constantly looking into this stuff.
And asking the questions, like that's the important part. Asking the questions, put the hypothesis together, run some tests.
Yeah.
And just be open-minded.
All right. So let me bring up this one that I contributed this week. So, well, I'm not actually going to play anything, but I just want to talk to you about this.
What's going on with Billy Carson?
So Billy Carson he did like a sort of debate with a biblical scholar.
Is that right?
And he got his ass handed to him, like real bad.
Really?
Like real bad. And then after that, he like goes back up to the dude's house, like after hours, like when his family is asleep, and he's like, they got video of him on like the Ring doorbell, right here.
No way.
Going up, he's trying to like wake up the dude and get him to pull the podcast and not publish it. They end up
calling the cops on
it.
him?
Ends up leaking. I don't know how, but you can watch the thing. And then he has a live stream for his audience talking and making a bunch of excuses for why it wasn't a fair debate. And towards the end of that live stream, he starts attacking his own audience because his audience is like, yo, dude,
you just lost.
You lost, man. It's okay.
Yeah. You did bad. That's not.
And he starts like saying that, I don't listen to poor people. Like all of you guys are poor people. Like you don't know what you're talking about. Like I'm not going to listen to people like you. And he starts insulting his audience.
Oh jeez.
He starts saying that he's going to be suing the podcasters. And then he says, well, and I don't even care if I win. I got the money I'm going to throw this at you guys, and now you guys got to spend the money to defend yourselves, which is like
and he straight
crazy.
up admits that too. Like,
yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, pretty bad. And the reason I bring this up is not to like shit on Billy Carson per se, but I want to sort of talk.
To it.
Yeah, well, I want to bring attention to it because he's one of these people, and this is why I find all these topics we talk about so difficult to approach, is because, I've got one foot like always like checking out like what the scientists are always talking about as the latest, and like just because scientists are closed-minded doesn't mean that when science actually discovers something that they're wrong. Right. They are actually going through a process that helps us discover more about how the world works.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you contextualize all that, and do they understand the worldview and the philosophy that they are agreeing to? And like a lot of them don't necessarily understand that they're like committing to this materialism worldview when the materialism worldview is not necessarily supported. It's not the best evidence. Anyway, so then you start, because of the holes in science and because of like open-minded scientists who are starting to show evidence of like psychic abilities and all this crazy quantum stuff that's going on, and all this like simulation theory and like all these directions that science is now going, that's starting to like break our materialist worldview. It starts to sound like it's like supporting all this new age stuff. And I agree with that. But the problem is, once you go in this new age direction, there's a lot of people in this. They're freaking hucksters, man. There's a lot of people in this that they're basically con artists. Like they know, like they've read a bunch of books, they've memorized a bunch of things, like they know how to use fancy words and fancy explanations, and they talk super slick and super confident, and they're like, oh, this book says this about this and that, and so that's why Jesus blah blah blah. And like they're so confident in their delivery that it makes you want to believe them, but they don't necessarily back up all their claims. Or when they do, they're just shouting out like ideas. And this is how he got wrecked in this debate, is because he's like calling out books and saying books are talking about this and that. And so the biblical scholar who has read all this stuff that he's calling out is like, well, this is what that book says. And he's like, okay, well, that's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about this one. And then he's like, okay, well, this is what that one says. And so his arguments start falling apart. And obviously, without that sort of like encyclopedic scholarly knowledge, you aren't necessarily in a position to
fact check in the
to
moment.
fact check all these people,
especially if you're just going down rabbit holes on the internet and you just follow one or two people and you're just on there.
And so how do you discern, like what are we as average everyday, you know, as we talk about in our intro, like we're just, you know, bystanders who, you know, we're just learning this stuff. We're average people. We don't have these crazy degrees. We're not some sort of scholar. Like what is the best way to go through this topic and discern the difference between someone who is selling snake oil and someone who's actually, you know, mind expanding, or someone who's actually got some really interesting points? And I don't know. I just wanted to bring up that topic because I think it's important that people think about it. Like, it's important to understand that just because and I am more and more and more, like, my beliefs are going in this like consciousness first direction versus the materialist scientific, old school scientific direction. Yeah. But the more and more you do that, the more you kind of have to be aware of these people that are. And so for me anyway, the question is, like, when you look at the person, this is how I use my discernment. I don't know I'd be interested to see what you do, but for me, how I use my discernment is to, how much does the person sell themselves as a know-it-all sort of expert? How much confidence does the person portray themselves as knowing everything? Mm-hmm. And Billy Carson has always like triggered that, like, he's talking with a little too much, like, this is how it is.
Well, and especially I've listened to his podcast where he talks about, you know, how he got into all of this stuff, and he's definitely one of the ones where you gotta like take a lot of what he's saying with a grain of salt. And like, sure, he might be citing real things, but at least in some cases he's citing a lot of like factual stuff. But
well, like he's mentioning biblical books that are part of the Apocrypha that we have discovered, but they don't say what he says they do necessarily. Right. And so
it's like,
you may Google the book he's name dropping and you find that it exists.
Right.
But you didn't, like, that's as far as you go. And like, okay, well, maybe he's right. And,
right.
The other thing, so like for me, it's like, how confident, or like, is that confidence like bordering on arrogance? For me, that's a big thing. Are they making claims without like showing people their references,
like Graham does, you know,
directing people towards other people's work that you can continue your research? Or are they always directing you back to their book, stuff, to their talks, to their, you know?
That's a telltale.
Because like someone like Graham, he's very humble with his claims and he tries to be as minimal as possible.
And he
likes to explore ideas. He's like, this is speculation here, but some of this evidence makes me think that maybe this or maybe that. This scientist has a different read on it. Stuff. He was published in this and that article. Go check it out. You know, like, or like Randall Carlson, or even Bashar. Like, he's making some pretty out there claims, but he's not also sitting there telling you, like, buy all my stuff, come to all my stuff. Here's exactly, like, you know?
Yeah.
He's not making himself this product.
Right.
In the same way.
Yeah, he's kind of leaving everything in your hands every time he talks. Like, he's like, this is what it is, and if it works for you, that's because your vibration allows it, or whatever. You know, he's kind of like,
well, he's making assertions that are some pretty big assertions, but for me, like, I like to treat it as like a thought experiment, and like, me too. You know, I chew around the idea in my head, like, what do I think of that? Like,
how can that help me, and what, and that's really the positive thing you can do in a lot of aspects of your life too. It's like, find the positive and chew on the idea, and like, you know, sit on things a little bit longer than you're used to. Especially ideas.
Right. And also a lot of the claims he's making don't necessarily have like modern day-to-day life implications, other than like suggesting to like be healthy, learn to meditate, like get in touch with your spiritual side. Like, I think all that's like pretty safe recommendations anyway.
Yeah.
But
Agreed.
Anyway, I just this whole thing, happened, and my buddy
I haven't
showed
listened
me
to anything
like,
Bashar. What's his name?
Billy Carson.
Yeah, I haven't listened to a lot of his stuff since his Rogan appearance, but
Yeah, did he have a Rogan? I thought he had a Daddy Jones recently. I don't know if he's ever been on Rogan.
Yeah, it's right there below.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yeah, he's
6
been on
months
Rogan.
ago. So anyway, just
Billy. Come
all
on,
these ideas are awesome. Just be
Not
careful.
all the people are awesome.
Just watch out for the ones who are like trying to make themselves the gateway to truth.
Yeah.
And
That's a slippery slope.
yeah. Anyway,
Use discernment.
let's take another break here,
All right.
and then we got some interesting stuff other than just shitting on people to talk about. So
Sick.
this is TJ McNulty, Colors.
Well, I've been given too much time to waste, and I have stolen too many times for me to change my ways. I have wasted too much time. I feel the difference, but never on the inside. I see your colors coming, well, your ears are trying to hunt me down. I've rinsed the rest of my body. Your colors don't stain me now. Well, I'm a spectator of things passing by. Like they say, I live my life all in good time. I've been a giver. Oh, what a waste. Like an old lover, I've been living my days all in bad taste. Well, I see your colors coming, well, your ears are trying to hunt me down. I've rinsed the rest of my body. Your colors don't stain. Your colors don't stain me now.
Welcome back.
Yay, segment 3. All right, so one other point I thought of during the break with the Billy Carson thing, I don't want to beat it to death, but the other part of like discernment that like gives me like weird vibes listening to him is like he's very much, he talks about different interpretations of like the Bible, and he talks about like these apocryphal books like the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff that got found afterwards, and he'll refer to them as if they are truth, but like the Bible itself isn't. And he'll refer to certain texts and say, well, this one says that, so that means the Bible is wrong and this and that. And for me, it's just weird because like, who makes you the authority on which books are true, which books aren't?
Yeah.
And I've just never seen him make like really well laid out arguments for why you should take this book over that one and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've seen him make the comparisons, and yeah, he doesn't really, you're right. A lot of times it's just his own.
I think it's fascinating to look at the apocryphal books, and I think taking that information into account is important. And I also think taking all of these like world mythologies into account is important. I think probably
creating a story specifically, like that's kind of the like exactly what we like. Graham creates a story. Whether his story is correct or not is not the important thing. It's that what I think, like, it's that idea is like everybody, like you can interpret a lot of this data differently, and you can omit and allow certain data based on criteria, which is what science does.
Yeah, but Graham demarcates what his claims are, right? So he's like, this part is the claim I'm making that can be tested scientifically. And I think with enough time, like we will show that this part of the claim is true.
And then he speculates on what that might mean.
And then outside of that, then he'll be like, all right, now I'm speculating, and I'm going to be like, this is the narrative that makes this claim make sense, right? So his claim being that there was a quote advanced civilization into the Ice Age, like previous to a cataclysm. But the narrative he puts on top of that of like that some of them survived and then came and spread across the world and like reseeded civilization. Like he's upfront about the fact that this is his speculation on top of it based on the evidence that he sees. But anyway, he's a lot more clear about it.
Billy
he's more reserved.
Yeah. And Billy is like you described, like loud, confident, in your face about his ideas, and then is always referring back to his own stuff, like, in a lot of ways. And it's important that people have we have all these different voices, but like we shouldn't do a whole nother segment on this, but
right.
You know how we feel.
Anyway, so I just wanted to bring up that other point is that that piece. Okay. All right, so let's look at this video I brought by Dean Radin. Yeah. This is published by the Institute of Noetic Sciences 4 days ago, and I found this really awesome. So let's check this out.
So this is about a project that we call Mind to Mind. And essentially, it's a way of studying this notion of the illusion of separation. One way to get into this topic is by asking, well, what is reality? Reality is what I perceive, isn't it? Well, no. So here's one example. So this looks like 3 perfectly lovely ladies, but let's turn this picture upside down. And something looks wrong. Well, what looks wrong is that their eyes and mouths are upside down. And so when we go back to the original picture like this, we can't see that it's upside down because our brains are so used to looking at faces that it hides that from us. So again, I'll turn it again. And there you go. So this is just one of thousands of illusions that show that our perceptions of reality are not always what it actually is. Here's another example. Choose one of these playing cards. Anyone, doesn't matter. Now focus on that card that you chose, and I've just taken it away. So how could I do that? Because there's lots of people on the call, and maybe you all chose different cards, but I took them away. Well, how did I do that? Well, here's the answer. So on the top is the original 6 cards, and on the bottom was the one where I supposedly took your card away. Well, they're all different. than the ones on the top. So yet another illusion that's used by magicians, where if you're focusing on a card, one of the 6 on the top, you're not paying attention to the other ones, and that's why the trick works.
That reminds me of. Did you catch what he was doing there?
Yeah.
That
It's still getting me though.
He changed all the cards.
Right.
So if you remember one of our early episodes when we were talking about consciousness, and I walked us through that exercise of okay, I want you to look around the room and keep in your memory every single thing you see that's green, and try.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right?
We did that.
And you do that, and then you close your eyes, and now I ask you to tell me everything that's blue.
Right.
And you can't really do it, and it's because your brain was in a mode of looking for green, not looking for blue.
Yep.
In a similar way,
Same
that's
idea.
kind of how that one works.
So all of this means that subjective and objective realities aren't the same thing. And what we see is what we expect to see. And what we see is a very thin slice of reality. So then what is real reality? Well, we have a clue from physics. On the right side there is the classical world, and the left side is the quantum world. And so in the classical world, our everyday world, we have terms like locality, causality, fixed reality, and space-time. These are what a philosopher would call naive reality. It's what we think we're seeing. We go deeper into the world of quantum mechanics, we find that this notion of separation that we feel, actually there is no separation. So instead of locality, we have non-locality, and we have acausality. We have a participatory reality, and it's beyond space-time. So there are other hints about what real reality is. And so here I'm plotting the impact of an experience and the frequency of that experience. So down here, we have things that range from the mundane to the profound, and from the common to the rare. So common, mundane things, people get gut feelings about events. And then there's the feeling of being stared at, and telephone telepathy, distant knowing, distant healing, premonitions, creative insight, religious epiphanies, mystical union. So who has these things? Well, down in the bottom left, everyone reports these kinds of experiences. People who are a little bit higher up on this scale, we might call healers or intuitives, geniuses, prodigies, saints, and yogis. So we can think of this as a spectrum, the extended capacities of the mind. Well, there's something peculiar about this thing, because these phenomena only seem strange for one reason. They suggest that the mind transcends time and space, everyday time and space. The other thing that's strange is up in the upper right here, these are very rare. There aren't very many geniuses and saints out there. It's beyond the reach of science, but it's well accepted that such people exist. Whereas down here, where lots and lots of people report these experiences, they're very common, they're easy to study, but they're considered highly controversial. So now we must leave our senses. Now, we're actually leaving the ordinary senses. So the kinds of experiences then that we can study and do study at IONS can be cast into these terms. There's terms like telepathy and psychokinesis and clairvoyance and precognition. All of these are commonly reported. These are the kinds of things that we can study in the lab. So today we're only going to look at telepathy. So in the most popular conscious form of telepathy experiment that has been done for the last 50 years or so, it's called the Ganzfeld method, and it's a German word that means whole field. And so you have a person put into this Ganzfeld state, we'll call them the receiver, and so you have a red light shine on them. Then you take a ping pong ball cut in half, and you put one half over each eye, so all they can see with their eyes open is pink. And then you put headphones on them that are playing white noise. So they can't see anything, they can't hear anything, but they're not sleeping either. They're still awake. And now you have a person playing the role of a sender, a telepathic sender, who looks at a randomly selected target and is going to try to inject the perception of that target into the thoughts of the other person. So rather than sending something, what appears to be happening more in these experiments is a correlation. That is, what is arising in the sender's mind seems to arise in the receiver's mind. And that is better than a transmission model because we don't see signals here, we see correlations. So in another experiment, the sender might see an elephant, and the receiver in the Ganzfeld state is asked to speak aloud anything that comes to mind. And so maybe they say something about an animal, maybe it's something about its gray. So then we take the person out of the Ganzfeld state. There were 4 images, one of which was sent by the sender, and we play back anything that the receiver said so they can be reminded of their impressions. So you can see at a glance here that the chance of the receiver being correct is 1 in 4. So here we have Gail, who's our guest today, being set up for the Ganzfeld experiment, and these are the ping pong balls over her eyes. And so this is where the experiment was done. Gail is inside our 2,000-pound electromagnetically shielded chamber, which we had when we had the Earthrise campus in Northern California. And these are the 4 targets that were randomly selected, one of which was going to be sent by another person elsewhere in the building. And so this is what Gail said. Something has a rough texture, tall, looking up high, like in an art gallery or in a museum, a Yosemite kind of image of a tall rock, monolithic, images of Mount Rushmore, and half dome, like a big stone. And since Gail is on the call today, you can ask her later what it actually felt like from the inside to get those impressions, because she had no idea what the image was that was being sent. But if you're now the judge in this experiment and you know that one of those 4 pictures was the actual target, which one we do select?
The pyramid, right?
Yeah. That this was the target. This is what was being sent, which matches the best among all of the other 4 pictures. And in fact, that's the one that Gail selected. So now Skeptic Dog says, yeah, but are these telepathy experiments independently repeatable, which is what's necessary in science to gain confidence that it's a real thing? So when you look at the experimental investigations of telepathy using this kind of method, and precursor methods too, from about the 1920s until today, lots of places. These happen to be ones at universities, but also they've been done at private institutes around the world. If you look at the 122 experiments that have been published in 20 different labs, there's 4,674 sessions like the one that I demonstrated from what Gail did. So there's over 4,000 sessions like that. And when you look at each of the 122 experiments and you look at the hit rate, well, the line in the middle is chance, the dashed line, but these dots are the actual hit rates, and the error bars are the 1 standard error bars. So we can take the same data, since all of the experiments were based on the same idea, and just make a cumulative graph as though it's just one huge long experiment involving all 4,000 sessions. And that's what you get. This is a cumulative hit rate over 4,600 sessions. This has been reported repeatedly in the academic psychology literature and one of the main publications in psychology. Starting in 1994, I think the last was in 2018. And so there's the overall result. So the overall result, as you can see, is about 31%. And the odds against chance of being there rather than chance is 300 trillion quadrillion to 1, with 10 to the minus 30th.
Whoa. Yeah. Wow.
You see why I like Dean Radin so much? This is awesome.
So it kind of like trickled down from like nearly 40% above chance, right? Or not above chance, but about 40% hit rate as far as like how accurate or how often. And then, but chance is sitting around like 20 something, like 23% or something like that.
Right.
So it was well above it, but it kind of landed, it kind of, scaled down, and it's about 31%.
And you can see this is probably the process of people developing better experiments.
You can see how
having better controls.
The error bars are. Like at the beginning, the error bars are massive, and then they obviously shrink as they get closer to the target. So it's sitting around like 31%. hit rates, which is a lot higher than 0.
Yeah.
With chance
with
being
odds
at like
of
19.
overall
or
results of
20
300
something.
trillion quadrillion to 1, you can say this: if telepathy doesn't exist, we would need to run this experiment 300 trillion quadrillion times to get a result as good as or better than what we've observed in these studies. And that would take longer than the lifetime of the universe to get these results by chance. So it's pretty likely that what we're seeing in these studies are not chance. It is something very close to the kinds of telepathic experiences that people report. And one thing I didn't go through here is alternative explanations. Well, they could take the case of Gail. Maybe Gail got some kind of sensory leakage about the target, even though she couldn't have because she was inside the shielded room when the experiment was taking place. Or maybe there were mistakes in recording or randomization and so on. All of these kinds of things have been suggested over the years. The one that was difficult to answer until recently was skeptical replication. Do skeptics doing the same study get the same result? Well, it turns out that they do. So here's 2 professors of psychology who did the same experiment, and they reported after 8 studies, we had overall statistically significant hit rate of 32%, where you'd expect 25%, which they then said is precariously close to demonstrating humans do have psychic powers. And they said that because they said in the article they didn't believe in any kind of ESP at all, including telepathy. So they were, to their credit, they reported the results that they got, but then they said, I don't know, maybe it doesn't really exist after all. And, prominent skeptics of psychic effects also now admit, based on these meta-analyses, that something interesting is going on. And so Richard Wiseman said, I think that these studies do meet the usual standards for a normal claim, but telepathy is not a normal claim. It's challenging to the scientific worldview, so he wasn't quite sure he was willing to say that telepathy exists. But something interesting is happening. That's pretty big for a skeptic to admit. Even looking at major scientific journals like Nature, considered one of the top 5 or so journals in the world, articles you find like this. This is all the way back in 2005. That the only reality is mind and observations. Physicists shy from the truth because the truth is so alien to everyday physics. The universe is entirely mental. And here in Scientific American from 2018, coming to grips with the implications of quantum mechanics, and you look at the article, and the main conclusion is a primary role for mind in nature. So these experiments are doing what Alice is doing here and pulling back the curtain, and we're beginning to look at the matrix, the informational nature of reality, and perhaps learning something new about it.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of ties back with what we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, the pulling back behind the curtain is like the understanding that there is like information which we are, in whatever capacity we are, actually, whether it's simulation, whether it's just information just being projected in our minds, and we are able to interact to it because of some agreement that it's real.
Yeah.
Like, what is it? What are the actual implications of this?
Right.
Of like actually believing this and like understand. Like, once you like are able to like give me some more details on what it means and like how to interact and how to like, if you can interact with once you understand it and are actually able to grasp the concept that we are everything that it's all just being projected based on information being coming into our brains, but we are not seeing the widest spectrum of what can and can't be seen,
right,
or felt or touched, right? It's interesting.
Yeah, so Dean Radin is super cool, and I love this because, skeptics and like materialist scientists will try to portray to you that there is no scientific evidence for these types of phenomena.
Yeah.
But things like the telepathy thing, the telepathy tapes, people like Dean Radin, people like what's his face? Sick brain, can't think. Are showing us that you actually can apply science to, you can apply the scientific method and empiricism to these types of studies. So I kind of did a little bit of a dive on podcasts with Dean Radin being interviewed, and he's got a new book coming out soon, and his last book is called Real Magic.
That's right, you were talking about that.
Yeah, and he had this one podcast with these two like more scientifically minded people, and he was talking about how it turns out that that different groups of people give you different results. So like these numbers he's showing is for this particular test for like random average people, right? Like they're not necessarily picking particular subjects to
that
do,
are more like already in like tuned to this a bit,
right?
Yeah.
And he says when you start to like bring in people who are like channels or people who are like psychics, you start to get higher hit rates. And those people start to perform above the average of like a normal person. And he said, but the highest hit rate he ever saw from like a population is people who are into the esoteric arts. So like people who are like study magic and that type of stuff.
Okay.
So those people seem to have a really
interesting like ability,
strong ability to demonstrate a lot of these.
So these
phenomena.
are people that are practicing like the
Kabbalah,
type of magic. Okay, that kind of magic,
or,
like classical like magic, not like tricks.
No,
Okay,
like esotericism.
Okay.
Like people who are in these secret societies, they learn these rituals. Like people like might be a member of the Golden Dawn, or people who might be into Wicca,
Sure.
or people who, you know, there's so many different traditions across the world. But he says people who are into the esoteric and have been like having like a more of a sort of lifelong continual study in that, they seem to have, they show even higher than like people who necessarily just claim themselves as like psychics and stuff, which is, I find super amazing.
Yeah.
And very intriguing.
They're tapping into some prehistoric knowledge.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's like that, between that and the telepathy tapes, I'm like, whoa. I think I'm at a point where I just need to see for myself. And so I got this book recently. It's called Modern Magic: 12 Lessons in the High Magical Arts.
Okay.
And it's like practitioners. It's like an intro practitioner guide that like teaches you 12 lessons. Like it teaches you like different rituals that you can integrate into your life to start walking down that path. And he kind of sort of samples from the different traditions. So that you can kind of get a feel for like what tradition speaks most to you. So you may be interested in going down this path or that path to continue learning.
That's interesting.
So yeah, I'm going through that book right now.
Sick.
It's really awesome. So he recommended getting tarot, and I got my first tarot deck, and I did my first tarot reading.
Yeah.
It was pretty fucking wild, dude.
Really?
It was. I'm not saying like my first time was like some amazing thing, but like
it interested you enough.
It's hard for me. Yeah, it seemed like the readout I was getting directly applied to the questions I was asking in ways that is like pretty. It made me pay attention.
Right.
So anyway,
piqued your curiosity.
I'm gonna keep reading this book, and I'm gonna keep starting trying the practices. I'm gonna see what results I get. So I'll report back.
That would be cool. That would be cool to see.
Yeah. So far, the first thing we've learned is like doing a relaxation ritual. Just like how
Seems
to
necessary.
Yeah, how to get yourself into a sort of meditative state. Is kind of what it seems like.
At least lower your heart rate and calm you down, right?
Yeah. And then like a basic tarot reading, and then they kind of went over a whole thing about tarot and how it works. And what I like about the book too is he sort of he leaves open how all this stuff works, and he's not necessarily trying to assert that there is something supernatural going on per se, because he will also point out that there are people who are magic practitioners who are like more materialist scientists.
Sure.
But for them, they think what's going on is maybe psychological, but
they still see it as a real effect.
A real effect, and
Yeah.
still see it as valuable.
Right. They just don't. They want to be able to quantify it before they put a label on it.
Right. So you don't necessarily have to believe there's any crazy woo-woo stuff going on to practice it. However, you do need to like believe that there are going to be results.
Something. Yeah.
Anyway, it's an interesting journey I'm just stepping into, and my background and my sort of like skeptical, sciencey nature.
Hopefully,
it's a little uncomfortable for me, but
do it, man.
I'm going
Go through
for
the
it.
whole thing. Yeah. I want to see how it goes.
Yeah. So anyway, I've got a whole bunch of other videos, and we could take a break and go into that. But like this, actually, now that I'm looking at it, this could be our whole episode. So
okay,
why don't we save these ones for next time and spare our sick voices?
Yeah, that's probably the best idea. I think we're getting it's starting to get bad.
Yeah, they're like the moment we stop recording, my coughs start getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, appreciate y'all hanging out with us. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to all those celebrating this month. We'll see you guys in a week. We plan to hopefully get this out on the same time scale. Anyway.
Yeah, I should be able to get this edited tomorrow night myself, but I don't know how long it'll take you to get your part. So at least the podcast portion should be available Tuesday.
You might get YouTube and Rumble a day after, but check us out on Spotify and Apple, or is it Apple Podcasts?
Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. And then if you want the video, it'll be out on YouTube and Rumble. Check out our website, dualitycheck.net.
Join the conversation. What do you think of magic? What do you think of telepathy?
Yeah, I want to see if anybody else has some more research or any other types of guides or something to
Do you
look
have
into.
any practices that you put into place? I'd like to hear about it.
Or have you been to the Akashic Records?
Ooh, yeah.
That'd be cool to hear about.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. We'll see you next week. Later.
Bye.